She said, "You married into this family. You knew the rules." That night, I didn't sleep. I started documenting every lie. 7 years of loyalty, and I was still the son-in-law, never the equal. 12 promotions stolen. 14 fake promises. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought I needed them. But I wasn't packing my things. I was packing proof. And when I placed that envelope on his desk, everything changed. Now, they're calling me at midnight, begging. But the man they ignored no longer exists. And the silence I left behind? It's destroying them. My name's Lucas Bennett. For 7 years, I put on a suit every morning and walked into Westbridge and Whitman, a boutique consulting firm built by my wife's father, Raymond Whitman. From the outside, it looked like I had it all. Married to the boss's daughter, front row seat at company events, part of the supposed inner circle. They'd see me smiling beside Sienna at banquets, Raymond tossing me that smug grin like I was part of his royal court. But what they didn't notice, or maybe chose not to, were the 12 times I was passed over. 14 promotions I'd earned. 14 sit-downs in Raymond's sleek, glassbox office, each one ending with the same script. "You're close, Lucas. Let's circle back next quarter." Every time, he'd lace those words with that polite, polished grin. The kind that belonged more to a politician than a father-in-law. It never quite touched his eyes. And every time, I'd nod like a good soldier. Because that was the role I was assigned. The dutiful son-in-law who never questioned the system. I remember that Thursday clearly. Late summer light slicing through the blinds, drawing sharp shadows across the carpet. The office carried his signature scent, leather, aftershave, and something colder. The chair groaned under me as he slid the folder across the desk, motion crisp like muscle memory. I didn't even need to look. I knew every crease of his hands, the way his veins stood out, those gold cufflinks flashing under fluorescent light. I'd been here before, hoping each time it might end differently. But his voice came out just the same, that careful tone, part mentor, part warden. "You're close, Lucas. I just need to see a little more leadership. Let's revisit next quarter." It was like a scratched track on a broken loop. I felt something twist inside me, a laugh crawling up my throat, not out of humor, but exhaustion. A single, hollow bark escaped before I could stop it. Raymond's eyes narrowed. That polished smile went stiff. "Something funny?" he asked, his tone suddenly sharp. I leaned back. Let the chair creak. Let the silence stretch longer than it should. Long enough for him to feel it. "No," I said. "Not funny at all. I didn't even touch the folder. Just left it there like an accusation." "Appreciate your time, Raymond." He frowned, a flicker of manufactured concern wrinkling his forehead. "Lucas, this isn't personal." Like he'd rehearsed that line. "Your family. I'm only thinking of what's best for the company." That word, family, landed like a slap. He always used it as a shield. Wrapped every cut in that same warm lie. I'd been bleeding by inches, and he called it tradition. The anger didn't boil. It settled, cold and certain. That was the word that broke the illusion. Family. That was the game, and I was done playing it. I walked out without looking back, past the plaques, the photos of Raymond cozying up to senators and CEOs. Past the receptionist who looked at me with that quiet pity, like she'd just seen someone get dumped in public. Maybe I had. Maybe that's exactly what happened. But something shifted inside me with that laugh. That final laugh. I wasn't going to be the obedient son-in-law anymore. When I got to my desk, the same forgotten corner they stuck me in for 7 years, right by the supply closet and the coffee machine that never worked, I sat down and stared at the blinking cursor. And I felt it. The weight of every unpaid overtime. Every weekend sacrificed. Every idea stolen and paraded by someone else. I thought of Sienna, how she always waved it away with a sip of wine and her father's smile. "He's just doing what's best for the company, Lucas." Like my ambition was a noise she could mute. I thought of every almost. Every maybe next time. Every quarter that turned into dust. And I felt something shift. Not quite a smile. More like steel setting in my jaw. I stood, my pulse in my ears. Took one last look around. The interns were bunched together, whispering jokes they'd share on Slack. The partners were in Raymond's office plotting the next win. And there I was, reflected in the glass. A man in a suit that didn't feel like mine anymore. A tie pulled too tight. Eyes dulled from years chasing something that was never going to be handed over. I packed slowly, carefully, like I was boxing up a version of myself I was never coming back to. Because in that moment, I wasn't Lucas Bennett, The quiet desk guy at Westbridge and Whitman. I was someone else. Sharper. Lighter. Clearer. I had finally stopped caring. And that made me dangerous. That evening, I walked through the front door expecting something. A flicker of concern. Some trace of recognition in my wife's eyes. But the apartment just smelled like jasmine, her favorite candles burning in the living room. Sienna was already curled up on the couch, glass of red in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling through influencers and handbags. The TV buzzed with some mindless reality show, casting pale blue light on her face. I dropped my bag by the door. The sound landed like a thud in the thick silence between us. She didn't even flinch. "Hey," she said, breezy and flat, like I'd just come back from the dry cleaners. I walked toward her, hoping maybe she'd see the tension in my shoulders, the tight line of my jaw. But she just took a sip of wine and cocked her head. "You okay?" she asked, like a habit, not a question. I let the air out slow, kept my voice even. Raymond passed me over again. She glanced up, blinked twice, trying to summon the right reaction. Said maybe next quarter, I added, hearing the bitterness scratch at the edge of my words. That makes 12 times, Sienna. 14. She exhaled, a sigh more tired than surprised, and set her glass down with a quiet clink. "Lucas," she began, with that soft, polished tone I'd come to recognize too well. The same tone Raymond used when he told me to be patient, to keep proving myself. "My dad knows what he's doing," she said, brushing at some invisible lint on her yoga pants like she couldn't be bothered. "He built that company from scratch. Maybe you just need to show him you're ready." Those words hit harder than I expected. "Show him I'm ready?" I repeated, my voice cracking before I could stop it. "Sienna, I've given that place everything. Every late night, every lost weekend. Every part of me." My chest tightened. "And all he does is keep shifting the goalpost. Doesn't that bother you?" She reached for her wine, barely lifting her eyes, fingers twitching like her notifications were more important than anything I just said. "He's testing you," she muttered with a shrug. "That's just how he measures loyalty. You know that." The wine glass caught a shard of light as she swirled it absent-mindedly, like that swirl held more of her attention than my breaking point. "Loyalty," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. "Is that what this is?" I stared at her. Because from where I'm standing, it feels more like he's making sure I never outgrow his shadow. She didn't answer. Just sat there with her legs crossed, her foot bouncing in that little impatient rhythm I knew too well. The signal that she was done talking. "Look, Lucas," she finally said, placing her glass down with a little too much force. "You married into this family. You knew the rules going in." Her words sank like a stone. Heavy. Final. "I thought I was marrying into a partnership," I said quietly. "Not signing up for a lifelong audition I was never going to win." For a brief second, our eyes met, and something flickered there. Maybe doubt. Maybe guilt. But whatever it was, it vanished just as fast. She picked up her phone again, scrolling without purpose. "I'm sure he has his reasons," she added, tone flat and detached. "He always does." I looked around the room. The silence between us had grown too loud. The flickering TV felt like a spotlight exposing a show I didn't even know I was in. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, the words sticking in my throat. "You knew he was going to pass me over again, and you just let it happen." She didn't flinch. Just took another sip, calm as ever. "Lucas, it's not my place to interfere with his business decisions. You know how he is. It's just business." Business. That word echoed in the air like a slur. I stood slowly, my legs suddenly unsure beneath me, and turned to face the row of framed family photos on the shelf. Pictures of us smiling, parties, company events, dinners with Raymond and his wife, all staged. All for show. One big happy family. But I could see now, I was the only one who ever believed any of it. I thought back to every time Raymond kept me dangling with empty praise. Every time he dangled Sienna like a prize or a shield. And I thought about how she let him do it. That night, I didn't go to bed. I grabbed a pillow from the couch, the one that still held the faintest trace of her shampoo, and laid down in the living room. I stared up at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, quiet circles, ticking off the minutes I'd never get back. I didn't sleep. Didn't even close my eyes. Because the thing I'd been avoiding, the truth I refused to face, had finally sharpened into focus. This wasn't about a title. It wasn't about Raymond, or Westbridge and Whitman. It was about her. The one person I trusted. The one who'd promised to stand beside me and chose silence instead. She chose him. By morning, the jasmine had faded, replaced by something colder, the lingering sin of betrayal, clinging to the walls like smoke. I sat up slowly, the weight of it all heavy in my chest. The decision had already been made inside me. I could feel it. This was the moment. The turning point. The last time I'd wait for someone to see my value. From here on, I'd write the story myself. As the sun crept through the blinds, casting that faint gold light across the room, something inside me shifted. It was small, hard to name, but irreversible. I knew that I'd never be the same again. And I didn't want to be. Because the betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. And that changed everything. I didn't shout. I didn't slam doors or issue ultimatums. What I did was quieter. And far more dangerous. I started documenting everything. Every system I built. Every process I refined. Every spreadsheet. Every fix. Every workaround I ever created to keep Raymond's firm from falling apart. I'd always been detail-oriented, the kind of guy who saved every file, every version, just in case. But now, every click of that save button carried intention, precision, strategy. I wasn't just organizing. I was fortifying. This wasn't for them anymore. This was for me. It began with a simple folder on my desktop, personal notes. Inside, I outlined everything, the architecture behind our most complex deliverables, how I salvaged Hallberg's analytics system after their CTO bailed mid-project. The dashboards I built for Clearstone's logistics team when their developers couldn't connect a single endpoint. I listed it all. Every invisible fix. Every piece of code. Every quiet miracle that kept Raymond's empty promises afloat. With every entry, I moved further from the man they thought they'd shaped and closer to the one I was becoming. I called the folder my indispensability map. Not because I still wanted to be needed, that ship had long sailed, but because I needed to see the proof for myself. Proof that I had always been the spine holding this place together. By day, I kept the performance up. I smiled when needed, spoke in measured tones, attended leadership meetings, gave clean answers. I mentored the new kids, the bright-eyed interns who thought praise meant promotion, who still believed in Raymond's promises. I taught them how to keep the gears turning even when the engine was falling apart. Quietly showed them where to tape over the cracks. What no one ever told me. But at night, I became something else entirely. Each late hour spent at my desk was no longer time given to Westbridge and Whitman. It was time taken back. I started small. Bought the domain for Veritas Consulting Group. It felt strange, almost indulgent. A name, a logo, a digital shell. Just lines of code sitting on my hard drive. But to me, it was more than that. It was a seed. And it was already growing. It wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a vow. I wouldn't let them define my worth again. I would build something that belonged entirely to me. No family name attached, no strings tangled in Raymond's empire. And I didn't change a single thing on the surface. That was the beauty of it. Raymond's so-called inner circle still saw me as the golden son-in-law, the problem solver, the one who always had a calm fix and a steady hand. I played that role like it was second nature, Oscar-worthy. When the project manager botched the Clearstone timeline, I stayed late and quietly untangled the mess. When Hallberg's CIO asked, again, why their reports kept failing, I gave that same calm smile and said I'd look into it. Again. But behind every fix was another entry on my indispensability map. Every time I cleaned up their chaos, I documented the exact path I took to make it right. I was writing my own exit manual, one line at a time. It's funny how easy it became, smiling while laying the foundation for my freedom. I'd always known how to read a room, when to nod, when to disappear into the background. Raymond had trained me without realizing it, showing me how he twisted facts into theater, how he bent perception into power. Somewhere along the line, I realized I wasn't just watching him. I was learning from him, but I wasn't playing his game anymore. I was playing my own. One night around 10, I was still at my desk. The light from my screen washed the room in this strange, sterile glow. Everything around me was dark, cubicles abandoned, coffee cups still half full, papers left in mid-thought. Ghost lights from idle monitors blinked like tiny campfires in the quiet. And I just sat there for a minute, letting it all sink in. The hours I'd poured into this place. The times I'd walked past Raymond's office and seen him leaving at 5, still smug, still proud. The night Sienna had called to ask why I missed dinner again, and I'd said sorry like I still meant it. Even then, I knew the promises I was making had already broken. I turned back to my screen, opened the newest version of the map. Read through the notes I'd left for myself. Lines of code, margin scribbles, back-end system patches only I could trace. I thought about Westbridge and Whitman, about how much of it rested on scaffolding I had quietly built. What looked solid from the outside was barely holding together. And I realized something that changed everything. I was the only one keeping this place from caving in. That truth didn't make me angry. It made me calm, solid, like armor settling around my shoulders. I didn't hate Raymond anymore. That was the part that surprised me. I didn't even hate Sienna. They were just who they were. The game had always been rigged. But somewhere in the chaos, I'd learned how to beat them at it. Not by breaking it, but by mastering it. I started seeing the fault lines they never noticed, the cracks beneath their glossy projections and shallow handshakes. And for the second time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I closed my laptop and let the soft hum of the servers fill the silence. No rage, no speeches, just movement. Quiet, controlled, strategic. That was the night Lucas Bennett stopped being the guy behind the desk and became the man behind the plan. 4 of our biggest clients, Hallberg Systems, Clearstone Health, Roven MedTech, depended on me. Not Raymond. Not his flash-in-the-pan strategists. Me. They didn't know the inner politics at Westbridge, but they knew one thing. When things broke, when delays threatened launches or bugs disrupted their systems, they called me. Not the project leads. Not the consultants with perfect smiles and useless portfolios. Me. Because I was the one who showed up. The one who rolled up his sleeves and didn't panic. The one who walked them through messes and kept their reputations intact. I was the guy they trusted at 3 a.m. when the CIO couldn't sleep. The guy who made sure their boards never saw the chaos under the hood. And deep down, I think Raymond knew it too, though he'd never admit it. That knowledge was leverage. So I started charting it all. Every client contact, every dependency, every point where my work couldn't be replaced by a polished deck or a new hire. I didn't do it to sabotage anything. That was never my style. I did it because I needed to see the truth in front of me. I needed to understand how deep I'd sunk into the foundation of this company, where I ended and where Westbridge began. And the more I mapped it, the clearer it became. They hadn't promoted me because they couldn't afford to lose me. They needed me too much to let me rise. That was the secret they'd never say out loud. I started with Hallberg. I'd rebuilt their logistics after their CTO bailed, revamped their analytics, trained their staff on every module. I was the reason their quarterly numbers didn't crash and burn every time. I recorded every step, how the pipeline worked, what could break it, and exactly how to fix it. Then Clearstone, their dashboard, from patient intake to billing, that was mine. Raymond promised them something innovative, and when the vendor failed, it was me, not him, who pulled the whole thing back from the edge. I cataloged every line of code, every patch, every script I wrote in those long, thankless weekends. Finally, Roven. Their compliance tracker was a disaster before I stepped in. I built them something airtight, audit-ready, clean. Because of me, their patient data stayed locked up tight. Their legal team slept through the night. And with every entry I made, a pattern emerged. A web of systems, all held together by my fingerprints. I wasn't just fixing anymore. I was learning. I was building a schematic of their entire structure. And at the center of that map was me. I didn't think I was irreplaceable. I wasn't arrogant. But I was honest enough to know, if I disappeared, they'd bleed before they recovered. That was power. Quiet, steady power. It changed the way I moved through the building. When Raymond's latest pet hire needed help with a presentation, I gave it to him. Smiled, offered just enough insight to make him look sharp, because I chose to. When the partners met for strategy sessions, I sat just outside the spotlight, listening, storing every word. Not because I craved inclusion, but because I needed to know how much they leaned on me without ever realizing it. They had no clue I was already packing my parachute. I didn't need to boast. I didn't need the applause. Because I had something better. The evidence. The quiet truth. The glue they ignored was the only thing holding the whole damn place together, and they had no idea how close they were to watching it all fall apart. I had always known how to blend in, how to wear the mask, how to play the good teammate, the guy who'd stay late, go the extra mile, smile through the thankless parts. But inside, everything had shifted. I wasn't just the fixer anymore. I was the architect. I saw every lever, every weak spot, every hidden thread holding the firm together. I knew which systems could run without me. I also knew which ones couldn't. I knew the relationships they'd ignored and the ones they'd quietly exploited. I knew the passwords, the backdoors, the quiet ways you could make a machine stutter if the wrong person tried to steer it. And the best part? I didn't have to do anything. The failures would unfold on their own, not out of sabotage, but because no one else had ever cared enough to learn how to fix what they broke. Sometimes I'd catch Raymond looking at me during our all-hands meetings, those corporate theater sessions where he tossed around words like vision and synergy like spells. He'd flash that polished CEO smile, the kind that said, "Good soldier." And I'd smile right back, calm, composed, fully aware that he had no idea what I'd built in the dark. He thought he was the glue, the linchpin, the face holding it all together. But he wasn't the glue. He was just the brand, the billboard, the guy in the brochure, the one who cashed in the credit. The glue was me. Most evenings, after the lights dimmed, I'd walk the halls slowly, past the cubicles, past the glass offices. I'd think about the people who came through here with wide eyes and open hearts, who left empty, burned out, forgotten. I thought about the messes I'd cleaned up, the clients I protected from Raymond's arrogance. And I'd smile to myself, not out of pride, but because I finally saw the truth. I'd earned the respect they never could, and I'd done it quietly, consistently. I had built something real inside a place that only cared about appearances. The irony wasn't lost on me. Raymond loved to talk about legacy, about building something that would last. But all he'd done was balance a house of cards on the back of a man he refused to see. And that man was me. Every late night, every weekend sacrifice, every silent fix, every fire I put out without credit. I was the one holding them together. But now, I was ready to let go, because the glue? That was mine to withhold. I registered the name, Veritas Consulting Group. The word Veritas meant truth. It felt like rebellion, like reclamation, like taking my future back without needing permission. It started simple. A domain name, a scribbled logo on a napkin in a dim cafe, a blank landing page with one bold line, "Coming soon." And even those little things, felt like air after years of suffocating under someone else's name. This wasn't his. It wasn't theirs. It was mine. And that made all the difference. I didn't rush. That was key. I knew better. Raymond had eyes everywhere, and ears where he needed them. He didn't like strays. So I moved quietly. I met old colleagues over lunch. People I'd trained. People who'd gone on to better places, freer places. We met in out-of-the-way spots. Cracked cafe counters, quiet wine bars no one from Westbridge frequented. And we talked. I asked about their teams, their roadblocks, their bottlenecks. I didn't pitch. I didn't promise. Just checking in. I'd say with a small smile, as if it were all nostalgia. But every question had a purpose. Every comment, a direction. I was planting seeds. Seeds that would sprout later, when the stress returned. When the systems broke. When they needed someone who'd already pulled them out once before. I didn't need to push. I just let them remember. Let them recall how I had shown up when no one else could. Back at the office, I wore the same mask as always. Showed up early. Stayed late. Solved what others couldn't. Raymond still believed in his golden hires. Those carefully selected stars who chased his approval like a prize ribbon. But while they played their games, I was building something different, loyalty. Not among the current staff, but among the people who'd already left. Who remembered me not as Raymond's son-in-law, but as the one who fixed what mattered. They were my real allies. My insurance. The kind of relationships that don't come from company handbooks or polished titles, but from trust. I could feel it in their messages. That warmth. That openness. It had nothing to do with logos or corporate flair. It was earned. And that was the insurance policy no contract could match. At home, I kept playing the part. Sienna would ask how work was, and I'd smile through it. Just the usual. I'd say, scrubbing dishes or folding shirts. Another small fire put out. She'd sip her wine, her eyes still on her phone, never digging too deep. I wasn't sure if she stopped caring, or if she ever cared in the second place. Maybe she'd always been more invested in the image. The soldier in Raymond's uniform. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't building for her. I was building for me. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The screen's light washed over me as I stared at the logo I designed. Veritas Consulting Group. Clean. Sharp. Real. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in the loud, chest-thumping kind of way, but in a quiet, unwavering certainty. I was building something on my terms. Something no one could take from me. I thought of all those times Raymond had said I wasn't quite there. All the fake smiles. All the invisible knives. And I saw it clearly. I had always been ready. He was just never ready to admit it. I reached out to someone I trusted, Brielle from Clearstone. She had always treated me like an equal, trusted me with systems that couldn't fail. Just checking in, I typed. Kept it light. She replied within minutes. Rough, honestly, Brielle wrote. Our dashboards keep failing. I miss having you around. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth as I read her message. Another seed planted. Another subtle reminder that I was still the guy who could make the hard problems disappear. Every exchange like that was a thread, a stitch in the quiet fabric of my future. A connection to the world I was slowly building for myself. And with each passing day, the old life at Westbridge and Whitman felt less like a career and more like a cage I'd quietly outgrown. I still wore the suit, still showed up for meetings, still nodded in the right places. But inside, I was already somewhere else. I was building something clean, something mine, a place Raymond couldn't touch and Sienna wouldn't understand. This wasn't about revenge anymore. That urge had faded. I'd moved past it. I didn't want to watch Westbridge burn. I wanted to rise above it. I wanted to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I had always been more than a name on someone else's org chart. I was the builder, the spine, the architect of my own story. And I didn't need Raymond's fake praise or his tired little carrot, dangling in the form of another maybe next quarter. I had my own map now, my own timeline, and every coffee, every subtle nod, every conversation like Brielle's was another quiet step toward my exit. I wouldn't leave bitter. I wouldn't leave loud. I'd walk away with the calm certainty of a man who had built his own empire from the bones of their neglect. I didn't need their blessing. I'd already given myself the permission they refused to offer. And that was real power. Exactly 8 months to the day after rejection number 12, I stepped into Raymond's office. Calm, ready, steady. I'd rehearsed the conversation the night before. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor it. Every word, every second. The office smelled like it always did. Leather, aftershave, quiet ego, the lingering scent of someone who always thought this room belonged to him alone. But today, the balance had shifted. Today, I was the one in control. I wore my best suit, the one Sienna had bought me for our anniversary. The same year Raymond passed me over for the second time. It still fit perfectly. Tailored. Crisp. Just like the systems I'd spent years perfecting. I polished my shoes. Tightened the knot of my tie just right. Because if there was one thing Raymond respected, it was the image. He taught me that much, even if he never said it out loud. At Westbridge, appearance was gospel, right up until it wasn't. He looked up as I walked in, eyes flickering with that old cocktail of calculation and condescension. Lucas, he said smoothly, leaning back in his chair like a king greeting a loyal subject. Have a seat. But I didn't. Instead, I placed a plain white envelope on the desk, neat, silent, final. No hesitation. No apology. Just the truth, sealed and delivered. His grin wavered as he picked it up. He turned it over like it might explode. What's this? He asked, voice a degree too sharp, already scanning my expression for weakness. I held his gaze. Calm. Certain. My resignation, I said simply. For weeks from today. As per policy. The words felt good. Not vengeful. Just right. Every syllable was a key turning in the lock that had held me back for far too long. He stared at the envelope like it was poison. You're quitting? He said, voice rising slightly. No? In the middle of a product migration? I almost laughed. The same migration I'd salvaged more than once, after his chosen stars fumbled it again and again. I thought about all the nights he called me past midnight. All the times he whispered, Lucas, I need you to fix this. But I didn't remind him. I didn't know him that. I just nodded. Yes. For weeks. Behind his eyes, I saw the storm forming. The disbelief. The panic. The slow realization that the glue he never acknowledged was walking away. We were just about to promote you, he blurted. I was pushing hard for Q3. There it was. The oldest trick in his book. Next quarter. Always next quarter. Always the carrot. Always just enough to keep you dancing. That's the game, isn't it? I said quietly. No bitterness this time, just clarity. Always next quarter. Always another promise. I let the silence stretch, then added, I'm done chasing. His face flushed, that vein in his temple starting to throb, his body speaking the fear his words couldn't. Don't do this, he said, his voice softening, almost tender. Your family. We've invested in you. Family. That word again. The chain he'd used for 7 years to keep me tethered. I stepped forward slightly, hands on the desk, voice low and steady. No, I said. I invested in you. Every night I stayed late. Every system I fixed. Every fire I put out to cover your mistakes. I straightened, letting the weight of the moment settle between us. And every time, you gave me the same line, next quarter. I leaned back and gave him the final blow. This is my quarter now. He blinked, mouth opening and closing like he wanted to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. And I saw it. I saw the panic flicker in his eyes. The knowledge that no one else could plug the holes. That the man who had held it all together was done playing the part. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was justice. Lucas, he said again, grasping. We can work this out. A raise. A title. Executive track. Whatever you want. I almost smiled. There was a time I wanted all of that. But that time was gone. His currency meant nothing to me now. No, I said, quiet but firm. You can't buy what I'm leaving with. He didn't understand. He never would. Because what I was taking with me wasn't just technical knowledge or client lists. It was the confidence of a man who no longer needed permission to lead. I turned and walked toward the door. My steps unhurried. My spine straight. I could feel him watching me. Could feel the weight of all I'd given this place. A place that once felt like the center of my world. But it wasn't mine anymore. It was his. And I was done carrying it. My hand touched the door handle. I paused. Just for a second. Just long enough to glance back. He was still sitting there, staring at the letter like it might explode. He hasn't learned how to defuse anything in 7 years, I said simply. Use the 2 weeks wisely. Then I turned and opened the door. The hallway lights hit me full in the face, bright, clinical, blinding. But I didn't flinch. Because for the second time in 6 long years, I felt weightless. Like I wasn't carrying anything that didn't belong to me anymore. I felt free. I felt like a man who had finally taken back his name, his time, his dignity. And with every step I took away from Raymond's office, I knew I wasn't just walking out. I was never coming back. That envelope, that wasn't just my resignation. It was my declaration of independence. And nothing, no promotion, no offer, no last-minute deal, could undo that. The collapse didn't start with a scandal or a dramatic blow-up. It started with stillness. A silence that slipped in between the cracks of Westbridge and Whitman like water seeping into weak foundations. No one noticed at second. That's how silence works. It began with an email from Clearstone's CEO. I read it on my phone while sipping coffee in the break room. Lucas, can we talk about the dashboard issues? Your team hasn't responded. My team. Funny how they always called it that, even though there had never been a team. It was just me. The guy who fixed their analytics stack alone. The guy who spent nights rebuilding their regulatory interface. The guy who trained their staff until they could debug my code blindfolded. And now, they noticed the silence. I didn't reply. Not right away. I let the email sit. Let it breathe. Let Raymond and his hand-picked favorites wonder why the gears weren't turning like they used to. Then came the call from Hallberg's CTO. Her voice tight. A little too fast. Lucas, we're seeing errors in the logistics module. Can you jump on a quick call? I waited. Not because I wanted them to fail. That was never the point. But because they needed to feel what they'd never acknowledged. It had never been Raymond. Never the shiny titles or the boardroom speeches. It had been me. All along. And somewhere, Raymond was starting to feel it too. He began showing up earlier. His shirts were wrinkled. His posture less sure. His grin, the CEO grin, was wearing thin. I caught glimpses of him pacing the halls, eyes twitching like a man waiting for an alarm to go off. He cornered me in the break room one morning. Tried to smile, but it came out strained. Lucas, he said, voice too casual. I know things got off on the wrong foot with your resignation, but come on. Let's be reasonable. He leaned in, like we were conspiring. I can offer a raise. Executive title. Whatever it takes. I sipped my coffee and nodded politely. But inside, I was already gone. Because my clients, my real clients, were already coming to me. Not to Westbridge. To me. Each time Raymond made another offer, I declined. Quietly. Calmly. And with each no, I could feel the cracks widen. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was just gravity. When the man holding up the house walks away, the walls buckle. And that's exactly what happened. The boardroom, once a shrine to synergy and vision, now sat half empty. Ghost town energy. Meetings marked urgent filled the calendar, but no one had any real solutions. The partners scrambled, fumbling to fix systems they'd never understood. I wasn't just a technician. I had been the framework. The guy who knew how everything connected and where it would fall apart when the wrong hands touched it. The breakdown came in waves. Missed updates. High-priority emails going unanswered. Dashboards crashing during live demos. And then the call came, Hulbert CIO, dialing Raymond directly, asking why Lucas Bennett wasn't responding. I could only imagine the look on his face when he realized he had no answer. I'd given him 120 chances. 1,000 signs. He never saw them. Now the silence was saying everything my words never could. He threw everything at me. Retroactive promotion. Title. Raise. Anything. Then he called me in one last time. He looked awful. Eyes red, tie crooked, hands clutching the desk like it might float away without him. Lucas, he said. We need you. I was wrong. You were the glue. You still are. Just name it. I stood there, watching him fall apart. For a second, I felt something like pity, but it passed, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every time he overlooked me, every time he repackaged my work as someone else's win, every time he weaponized my loyalty and made it a shield. I'm sorry, Raymond, I said softly, but I can't come back. I have other commitments now. His face dropped like the air had been pulled from the room. Please, Lucas, he whispered. Think about the team. The clients. We need you. I nodded once. I did, I said. For 7 years, I thought about them every night. I let the pause hang. And that's exactly why I'm leaving. Because you never did. He slumped back, shoulders folding in on themselves. Nothing left to fight with. I turned toward the door. The metal handle cool in my palm. And when it clicked shut behind me, it didn't sound like anger. It sounded like peace. Back at my desk, I checked my inbox. For new messages. New clients. People who'd heard whispers about what I was building and wanted in. I hadn't recruited them. They came to me. Because loyalty doesn't lie. And that's something Raymond would never grasp. In the weeks that followed, Westbridge and Whitman came undone in slow motion. I watched from a distance. Emails stacked up, unanswered. Project managers spun in circles, patching holes in systems they never took the time to understand. Clients drifted, second quietly, then openly. And I kept building. Veritas grew, not with noise, but with honesty. Because not all collapse ends in fire. Sometimes, it ends in silence. And that silence is louder than anything else. On my last day, I walked into the boardroom one final time. It looked like a wake. Half-filled chairs. Coffee rings on forgotten notes. A whiteboard smeared with erased ideas and empty targets. Even Raymond, the man who once strutted through every room like a CEO out of a stock photo, looked hollow. His tie hung loose. His hair unkempt. His eyes bloodshot from nights of grasping at control he no longer had. The Golden Boys, the ones who used to flash smug grins during presentations, now kept their eyes glued to the floor. Their faces pale. Like the very air in the room had turned toxic. I walked in carrying only a small box. Just a few things, the framed certificates they gave me back when I still believed the awards meant something. A couple of lapel pins I bought myself. And a chipped mug that read, World's Best Dad, though my kids gave it to me long before I ever walked through these doors. I didn't need the box, but I wanted the ritual. I wanted to look them in the eye as I left, to let them feel the weight of what they've lost, the cost of their choices. Raymond was already standing at the head of the table, braced like a man waiting for the firing squad. His eyes flicked up as I approached. For a moment, I thought he might say something human. Thank you, maybe. But then the mask slipped back on. Lucas, he said, voice rough like he'd spent the night rehearsing. Let's talk. I set the box on the edge of the table and crossed my arms, saying nothing. He gestured toward the chair across from him, the same one I'd sat in a dozen times while he explained why I wasn't quite enough. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, because this conversation wasn't on his terms anymore. Look, he began, dropping his voice like we were sharing secrets. I know things haven't always been perfect between us, but we're at a crossroads now. The clients are on edge. The team's morale is shot. You leaving, it's a good punch. He took a breath. Lucas. I need you. I raised an eyebrow, almost smiling. The irony too perfect. You need me, I said slowly. That never came up during the 12 promotions you passed me over for. His face flinched. Just enough for me to see it. The second real crack in his armor in years. I'm not perfect, he muttered, his voice raw now. I've made mistakes. But you've always been part of this family. We can fix this. I'll double your salary. Equity. Title. Just stay. It was almost laughable, watching him scramble to throw money at a wound he couldn't name. But that was always the problem. He thought loyalty had a price tag. He never understood that what I wanted wasn't power. It was respect. It was trust. And he had eroded both, rejection by rejection. I leaned forward slightly, my voice firm but calm. You can't fix this with a check, Raymond. You taught me that. I let it hang before finishing. When you passed me over one last time, when you showed me I'd always be the son-in-law, the soldier, never the equal. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted to the exit, like he wanted to escape his own office. But I kept going, because he needed to hear it. I gave you everything, I said, voice low and steady. I carried this company when your stars failed. I saved your biggest deals. I built the dashboards that saved your reputation. I paused, letting the silence settle. And every time you said, next quarter, I waited. I exhaled. Clean. Final. But I'm done waiting. I'm done being the glue. You only notice it when it's gone. The room went quiet. Thick with it. Raymond's yes men, the ones who had once smirked at my loyalty, now looked anywhere but at me. One partner shifted in his seat, like he might speak up. But then he didn't. Raymond tried one more time, his voice trembling. Lucas, think about what you're throwing away. The relationships. The trust. You walk out that door and it's over. We can't protect you out there. I let the breath come slowly. Measured. You're wrong, I said softly. The relationships weren't with Westbridge and Whitman. They were with me. I saw the truth land in his face. Hard. I was the one they called at midnight. I was the one they trusted to deliver. You thought you owned them, but you never did. His face collapsed in on itself, like a man realizing the foundation he built wasn't his to begin with. Don't do this, he whispered, barely audible now. Don't throw away what we built. I looked down at the box in my hand, felt its familiar weight, the weight of the years and what I was choosing to leave behind. We didn't build it, I said quietly. I did. And now I'm building something else. I turned to go. And this time, no one stopped me. Their eyes followed me as I left. Some in fear. Some in awe. Maybe, finally, in respect. The elevator ride down felt like peeling off an old skin. Every floor that ticked by. I felt lighter. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, I wasn't just a man leaving a job. I was a man reclaiming his story. Outside, the city buzzed. Horns. Footsteps. Glass towers flashing in the sun like signals. I stood still and breathed it in, that wide open air. It wasn't just oxygen. It was clarity. It was mine. Because when the table finally turns, it's not about revenge. It's about choice. And I chose me. Veritas Consulting Group wasn't just a name. It was everything I'd learned in silence, from every next quarter, from every system I built that no one else could fix. It was every lesson they taught me without knowing. That loyalty is a currency they spent too freely. That talent is a tool they used but never valued. At Veritas, I wasn't building an empire. I was building a sanctuary. A place where people mattered. Where value wasn't measured by titles, but by truth. We started small. Just me. One room. A used desk. A whiteboard stained with years of other people's failed plans. But nothing could dim the fire in me now. I poured myself into it. Every night sketching pitch decks. Rewriting the code I once saved under Raymond's name. Jotting business plans on napkins and sticky notes that cluttered the desk like falling leaves. Everything I learned at Westbridge, the strategy, the structure, the leadership, I used it all. But now I used it for me. Clients came slowly at second. But soon, the calls came like clockwork. Not because I stole anyone. I never stooped to Raymond's tactics. They called me. Clearstone's CIO reached out just weeks later. We've decided to move the analytics project to Veritas, she said. We just don't trust the team at Westbridge anymore. And that was the difference. Trust. Not titles. Not logos. Trust, the one thing Raymond never knew how to build. Then came Hallberg. Their systems kept failing. They were tired of excuses. Tired of half-fixes. And I knew their systems like the back of my hand. But more importantly, I'd always documented everything. With integrity. With care. Because even back then, I was building something real. I didn't sabotage a thing. I didn't have to. The rot at Westbridge had been there for years, buried beneath the surface. Years of shortcuts. Sloppy fixes. Half-baked solutions held together by people like me, the ones who stayed late to keep the illusion alive. All I did was step away. And now, the truth was finally catching up to them. I was the only one who ever had the blueprint to make it work. And I'd already built something better. Veritas didn't just grow, it thrived. One of my second hires was Miles, a sharp strategist Raymond had once dismissed as too green for client-facing work. I remembered him from college, quiet, focused, always listening like every word mattered. At Veritas, he became my right hand. No ego, just excellence. Then came Lila, the UX designer Westbridge had kept in the background, never quite trusting her instincts. I'd seen what she could do, how she transformed clunky interfaces into experiences that just made sense. At Veritas, she wasn't just a designer. She was the reason our work felt different. I gave them titles that meant something, roles that fit their strengths, and the space to grow without fear of being overshadowed or dismissed. We built systems that valued people, weekly stand-ups where every voice mattered, not just the loudest one. Performance reviews focused on growth, not blame. Internal tools that actually fit the work, not just Raymond's obsession with aesthetics. Every day felt like a step forward. Every day was the opposite of Westbridge. We weren't just making money. We were building something honest, something real. 6 months in, Clearstone signed an exclusive 6-figure retainer, our second industry-shaking deal. The confirmation email hit my inbox just after midnight. Subject line, "It's official." I sat in my office with the lights off, watching the city glow through the blinds, letting it sink in. It wasn't luck. It wasn't revenge. It was respect. Real, earned, quiet respect, the kind you don't have to demand. The kind they give freely because they know you show up when it matters. I thought about all the times Raymond told me I wasn't ready. All the times he whispered, "Next quarter." And I smiled. Because I built something he never saw coming. Hallberg followed soon after. They'd grown tired of delays, tired of patchwork solutions, tired of waiting. They didn't want promises anymore. They wanted results. They wanted Veritas. When the contract came through, I didn't gloat, didn't post a victory post, didn't need to. Because this wasn't about proving Raymond wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Every new client was a quiet nod, not just to our work, but to the way we worked, to the care we put into every system, to the people we invested in. Lila started bringing in other designers, people who'd been overlooked, underestimated, underused. Miles began mentoring junior strategists with the kind of calm patience I'd always respected in him. I watched the company take shape, and I felt proud, not just of what we built, but of who chose to build it with me. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to wait for recognition that never came. And I made myself a promise: no one at Veritas would ever feel that way. No one would have to wonder if they mattered. No one would wait for it next quarter. We were agile, focused, accountable. Even the late nights felt different, lighter, energized. We weren't putting out fires. We were building something that never caught fire in the second place. And our clients could feel the difference. Veritas wasn't just succeeding. It was redefining what success looked like for me, for my team, for every client who'd ever been let down by men like Raymond. Late one night, sitting alone in the office, I thought about the journey from Westbridge to here. All the little betrayals, the overlooked moments, the silences that taught me to trust myself. And I realized something simple but powerful. I would never have to ask for permission again. Never wait for someone to tell me I was ready. Because I had already built it, line by line, hire by hire, client by client. Veritas wasn't just a company. It was my vindication, my freedom, my future. It was proof that the man they ignored, the one they underestimated, had been the one holding it all together. And now, I'd built something they couldn't touch. Something that was mine. Exactly 15 months to the day after I left Westbridge and Whitman, I sat in my new office, real wood paneling, soft ambient lights, and the scent of fresh coffee in the air. It was late, but I didn't mind anymore. At Veritas, late hours felt like growth, not sacrifice. Outside, the city moved like music, steady, alive. And then the phone buzzed. Raymond Whitman. I stared at the screen, letting the name settle in. 14 times he'd passed me over. 14 times he chose someone else. 14 chances he had to see me. Now he was the one calling. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lucas Bennett," I said. Calm. Professional. The voice I'd used 120 times in client meetings. But this time, it felt different. There was a pause. And then, finally, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Lucas, let's talk merger." His tone tried for smooth, but it landed somewhere between desperation and last chance. "Veritas and Westbridge," he said. "Imagine what we could do together." I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my shoulders, and let the silence stretch. I pictured him alone in his office. Sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights. I pictured dashboards failing, clients fleeing, juniors drowning in systems they never learned. And then I pictured Veritas, our clients, our team, the quiet, thriving world we built. Raymond, I said slowly, each syllable deliberate. The man you passed over 12 times? He doesn't exist anymore. There was a breath on the other end, shallow, nervous, like he was still trying to keep up. Lucas, come on, he said, voice cracking. You know Westbridge has reach. Infrastructure. We've got the legacy. That word again. Legacy. I let out a quiet laugh. Not cruel. Just honest. Legacy, I repeated. That's what people say when they're afraid of change. When they're afraid the world moved on without them. Don't do this, Raymond said, urgency creeping into his voice. We're stronger together. Just think about what we could build. I exhaled slowly, steady and sure. Raymond, I said. I already have. I let the pause linger. Let it sit there like a truth he couldn't dodge. And I built it without you. The silence that followed said everything. I pictured him on the other end, staring at the phone, maybe still in his office, finally realizing that whatever power he thought he had disappeared the day I walked out and never looked back. I thought about all the years he dangled my future in front of me, like a carrot always just out of reach. I remembered all those days I spent hoping he'd see me, waiting for him to promote me, treat me as an equal. And now, I could see it clearly. I had never needed his approval. I never needed him at all. Lucas, he tried again, clinging to the edge. Just think about it. We could. No, I said, my voice calm, final. I don't need a merger. A breath. I already won. Then I ended the call. No drama. No triumph. Just peace. I set the phone down gently on the desk and turned toward the windows. The city beyond lit up the glass like a living map, every light a new possibility. I felt weightless. Not because Raymond had lost, but because I had finally stopped trying to win his game. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving myself right. That I was worth it. That I'd always been worth it. Because revenge isn't loud. It isn't rage. Revenge is rising. It's building something better, something real, something no one else can touch. It's the look in Miles's eyes when he closed his second major deal and thanked me for believing in him. It's Lila's smile when she saw her designs in use, no one else's name attached, no watered-down version. It's every client call that begins with trust, not panic. It's the simple truth that I became the person I had waited for. I looked around my office, not just at the walls, or the furniture, or the view, but at the photos. Photos from our second big launch. No suits, no stiff handshakes. Just real people, laughing, cheering, building something that mattered. I thought of the long nights that didn't feel like work, of the brainstorms that turned into breakthroughs, of the systems we created, not to impress anyone, but because they actually worked. I thought of the culture we'd crafted, where voices were heard and loyalty was earned, not bought. I picked up the marker and walked to the whiteboard. And I wrote a single word in bold, confident strokes. Freedom. That's what this was. Not just financial freedom. Not just career freedom. But freedom from the lies they fed me. Freedom from being boxed in. Freedom from the version of myself that once believed I had to keep earning someone else's respect. I wasn't that man anymore. The eager young guy who once walked into Raymond's office hoping to prove himself? He had grown. My phone buzzed again. A text from Miles. Client call tomorrow at 10. They want to expand the scope. I smiled. The work didn't stop, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a gift. I turned off the desk lamp and let the night take over. The city lights spilled across the ceiling like stars painted in glass. And I thought of the second day I stepped into Westbridge, full of ambition, full of hope. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet thank you. To the man I used to be. To the lessons that shaped me. To the people who underestimated me, and, in doing so, pushed me to become more. Because the final word wasn't Raymond's. It was mine, and I had answered it.